Okay, it looks like you can hear me. I hit mute all. I'm David Preston. I'm a longtime proud member of Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors of Greater Philadelphia, founded in 1979, making us one of the nation's oldest such organizations. And I am delighted to be uh, hosting, quote unquote, hosting this program with Seth Stern. In a minute or two, I'm going to turn over the hosting to Matt Klyman, who did a wonderful job of organizing this. But I wanted to first give my credentials for hosting this program. I grew up in Wilmington, and my sister and I, uh, my sister's on the call too, I see. We can well remember the weekly Thursday visits by a chicken farmer from Vineland named Rudolph Stern, who had a route in Wilmington where he served um, the Jewish community who wanted kosher chickens and eggs. And he came in a truck every Thursday, sometimes with his uh, son or daughter, can't remember, but a wonderful man. Um, and this happens to be a picture of a man named uh, Moshe Goldfein, Morris Goldfein. Uh, he didn't speak any English. He spoke Yiddish to chickens. He is my wife's grandfather. And I also I used to write a column called "The Scene" in South Jersey in the Philadelphia Inquirer, where I um, did write several columns about the old Alliance colony um, that we're going to hear more about today. I know there have been some other efforts to document this. This is a book that came out in 1981 uh, uh, that I know that Seth is familiar with. And this book came out more recently. This woman is an academic, and she wrote a very nice blurb on the back of this book, which is the book that we're going to be hearing more about today. So, with that, I want to say hi to everybody. We appreciate your joining us today, and going to see if I can uh, do this transfer over to Matt.
All right, I'm fine. Hi, everybody, and good evening. Hopefully, everybody is warm and safe and comfortable. Um, my name is Matt Klyman, and I am actually, I get, oh, okay.
He's actually what?
I am actually a 2G once removed. My wife, in fact, is a 2G. And want to again thank everybody for joining today, joining us to hear from Seth. A little bit about your host and a little bit about your sponsoring organization, and David certainly mentioned it. Sponsors here tonight are the Sons and Daughters of Holocaust Survivors of Greater Philadelphia, founded in 1979. Most of the members are, in fact, from the greater Philadelphia area, but some a little further. This is a caring community prioritizing education and mutual support for the membership. We work to preserve and share our family stories and process our collective and personal traumas. I want to give a special thanks to Steve Osterman, who is, in fact, on the call today. I've always had a strong curiosity about Vineland. Again, as a Philly boy, I've known about Vineland forever as a rural community which had a large Jewish population and a Holocaust survivor population. But I never really knew any more details. I met Steve at our synagogue, who first told me about his own personal experience and then gave me a copy of the book, which I was fascinated by. So I had the chance to reach out, and I thought this is really a story that needs to be told much more broadly. And so I reached out to Seth, who's going to be discussing the book tonight, and again, opening up. We'll open that up to questions after. I'm really pleased to be able to present our presenter today, by the way, Seth Stern. Seth is a legal journalist and editor of the Bloomsburg Industry Group. He previously reported for Bloomberg News, Congressional Quarterly, and Christian Science Monitor. Uh, he is also co-author of Justice Brennan, Liberal Champion. Seth, I know his educational background is it's okay. Graduate of Harvard Law, Harvard Kennedy School, and Cornell University. Not bad. Um, Seth started the project shortly after graduation from college, and he interviewed his grandmother Bronya. And if you've read the book, you know that she is a central part of the book. And this, by the way, is his mother's mother, and mother's mother and father really are the people who you certainly hear the most about. Um, and Seth said he kind of let it be on the shelf for a number of years, and he may talk a bit about this. And then COVID happened, and it provided him the time to get refocused on this project again. And he'll probably talk as well, really expand his research process in terms of speaking to lots of people to get first person interviews about what was like life was like on Vineland, and not just Vineland as well, other communities like Vineland, and there were a few others. Um, the book itself it's a remarkable story of loss and renewal of people who chose a very different path to find their way in America. And by the way, Seth and my wife said it. The title alone is enough reason to want to go pick up the book and really read it. It really, Seth, it's my pleasure to present you and let you really talk about the book and Vineland. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David and Matt, for the invitation to speak with you tonight from what is a very cold and very snowy Washington, D.C. I assume those of you in the Philadelphia area are experiencing something similar, so I appreciate you joining tonight. I know some of you may have ties to, or at least some familiarity about the South Jersey Jewish poultry farming community. For the rest of you, I'll be showing some photos as I talk to give a sense of the time and the place that I'm talking about and I wrote about. Let me start by going back what's now 27 years. While home on Long Island studying for law school finals in December 1998, I visited my grandmother each afternoon and started asking her about her life over lunch. We talked about her growing up in Lublin, Poland, how she survived the war hiding with my grandfather in an underground forest dugout, and then coming to the U.S. as refugees. You can see my grandparents here let me in this photo. Uh, there on the right in the photo, my mom is the girl with the darker hair. They're pictured here on the Marine Perch, the former U.S. troop ship that brought them to the United States in February 1947. In the years that followed, I visited Lublin and Belzec, the extermination camp where my grandparents' families were killed, and Bensheim, the town in Germany where they lived as displaced persons. But the part of their story that came to fascinate me the most is how my grandparents and about 1,000 other survivors came to settle as poultry farmers in South Jersey. This is a personal story, and I explore in the book how my family and my grandmother's childhood friend, who were also in the photo from the Marine Perch and are here in this photo, how they came to share a single farmhouse for many years and raise their daughters as twins. But it's also a broader story about how Jews came to be farmers in the U.S. and why survivors wound up in this unique South Jersey community anchored by Vineland, New Jersey, halfway between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. Most Jewish immigrants in this country gravitated to big cities, but smaller numbers settled in rural America, whether Appalachia or Gold Rush, California, or the Mississippi Delta, where they started out often as peddlers and then opened dry goods stores. A few had tried farming, often with the help of the Jewish Agricultural Society, funded by a philanthropist named Baron Morris de Hirsch. The first big wave of Jewish farming came in the 1880s when idealistic Russian Jews established communal farming colonies throughout the U.S. Most quickly failed due to bad weather, the farmers' inexperience, or malaria. The few that survived were in South Jersey, where they were close enough to big markets in New York and Philadelphia. In the early 20th century, the Jewish Agricultural Society largely gave up on colonies and focused on settling Jews on individual farms. The Jewish Agricultural Society published a monthly magazine, The Jewish Farmer, which was the only Yiddish English agricultural publication of its kind. If you opened it at the front, it was in English, and then if you flipped it over, was the Yiddish pages. This is the last issue is pictured here in the late 1950s. In the 1930s, Jews farmed in all 48 then existing states, but they were mostly concentrated in the northeastern U.S., from the Berkshires down through Connecticut, into the Catskills in New York, and into New Jersey, including in central New Jersey communities like Lakewood and Farmingdale. The form of farming that tended to work out the best was chicken farming. It required less capital, it was less physically demanding, and required less land. So when the first Jewish refugees to make it out of Germany arrived during the Great Depression, the Jewish Agricultural Society saw poultry farming as a great solution and looked to South Jersey as an ideal place to direct them, since farms were cheaper there than in central New Jersey or some of the other communities I mentioned. There was an influx of refugee farmers in and around Vineland, this community of roughly 30,000 people. You can see two of those families here, including the photo on the right the son likes to describe as their version of American Gothic. As this photo of Vineland's Main Street, Landis Avenue, from that era shows, they moved to a community that looked like many small towns, with a Woolworths, a Sears, a Pontiac dealership. But it was also uniquely laid out, with glass and clothing factories mingling with farms and many Jewish-owned businesses. The descendants of the original Italian immigrants tended to grow fruits and vegetables, and Jewish farmers raised chickens. The displaced persons, as they were known, who had lost their families and came to the U.S. without much money and knew little English after 1945 when the war ended, were attracted to farming by the promise of being their own boss and the fact that, as the book title suggests, the chickens didn't care if you spoke Yiddish to them. Survivors dissatisfied with life in New York or whichever big city they'd initially landed in usually heard about poultry farming by word of mouth, whether it was a distant relative or a landsman from their hometown, or someone they met after the war in a displaced persons camp. Many newcomers who'd never farmed before and had little idea of what it involved expected farming would be easy. A favorite quote I read in a survivor's oral history was, "You don't do nothing, just collect the money." One survivor remembered hearing in Detroit before moving to Vineland, as if chickens laid $10 bills instead of eggs. As I'll discuss, the reality of farm life was much different. At first, timing worked out in their favor. The new arrivals, who suffered so much during World War II, benefited from the start of the Korean War in 1950, which drove up demand for eggs, and egg prices reached all-time highs in 1951. In this era, poultry was king in Vineland. The high school dubbed its football team the Poultry Clan. This was their logo. The city had billboards boasting of it being the home of Vineland eggs. Vineland even hosted a poultry festival that boasted the world's largest frying pan. I showed this picture at one event I did, and someone raised their hand after during the question and answer and said, "I was there, great event, except for the birds that left their droppings in the giant pan, so I don't know how good the omelets were." There are hundreds of local poultry farms, including 500 purchased by Holocaust survivors alone. There were 17 poultry feed mills and 25 hatcheries and poultry dealers in the area. Many of these businesses were Jewish-owned, such as the Rubinoff Feed Mill, which was the largest of its kind in the eastern United States. The Vineland Egg Auction, where many of the farmers brought their eggs to be sold, was shipping 600,000 cases of eggs. That's 18 million eggs to New York City in the mid-1950s. Poultry would become the top agricultural enterprise in the state, and 4 New Jersey counties ranked in the top 10 for the entire nation at the time in terms of chickens, including Monmouth and Ocean counties. To give you some sense of what these farms looked like, at the time, the typical family poultry farm in the Vineland area was about 10 acres and housed 3,000 or 4,000 chickens. Most of these farms raised egg layers. Some sold them for meat, which were known as broilers. Even in the best of times, this was dirty, difficult work. You had to wake up early in the morning to make sure the chickens' water didn't freeze. You couldn't easily take a day off since the chickens needed to be fed 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Viruses could wipe out whole flocks. Wild dogs would snatch them in the night. Hens were nasty when cooped up in together and could peck each other to death or smother each other in a panic during air raid drills. The stench of their waste could be overpowering. Brooder stoves used to keep baby chicks warm could catch fire and burn down the coops. The economics were tough even in good years. Farmers had to buy chicken feed, the price of which remained artificially inflated by government price supports for grain and corn, even after World War II era price supports for poultry got lifted. Finding reliable laborers proved challenging, and the relationship between small farm owners and their workers was often fraught. Most of the newcomers who arrived during this period, particularly the refugees, had never farmed before, as I mentioned, and had no idea what they were doing. Many had grown up in big cities like my grandparents and found it isolating to live on a farm. Others who moved to farms from crowded New York tenements found comfort in having so much land to themselves, even if they had to share their property with thousands of hens. Their embarrassing missteps became the butt of jokes among veteran poultry farmers and local veterinarians, like the farmer who washed his eggs with water so warm they boiled inside, or the farmer who told to give his chickens a teaspoon of vaccine, substituted an old family heirloom spoon 3 times too big, and poisoned his flock. Many newcomers who'd hoped for a stable, quiet life recoiled at all the uncertainty. Some dropped out of the poultry business as soon as they arrived. One survivor refugee lasted only 9 weeks raising chickens before he found a job making draperies and slipcovers for the Sears Roebuck department store on Landis Avenue. But many more of the new farmers stuck it out. As one farm wife later recalled, "You'd be surprised how fast you can learn if you're in a jam. We had to make a living and take care of the children, and you just did it. We were fast learners. We had to be." Part of what eased their transition was the uniquely large Jewish presence in Vineland. I'd mentioned earlier how Jews had settled in rural America, but by the 50s, most rural Jewish communities had shrunk as Jews, like everyone else in small towns, had moved to cities or onto the suburbs. In Vineland, the descendants of the original farm colony settlers and the German refugees that followed in the 30s and 40s had built a remarkably robust Jewish community full of synagogues, kosher bakeries, butcher shops, and delis. Decades later, so many people I spoke with recalled the taste of Goldstein's pastrami and the smell of onion rolls from one of the Jewish-owned bakeries half a block away. Vineland had multiple Zionist organizations and a half-hour local radio show every Sunday morning called The Voice of Israel. In the 1950s, Manischewitz opened a plant there to make borscht and gefilte fish. The survivors would enrich this Jewish community and make it their own. They built stiebels or small shuls, often with their own hands, within walking distance of their farms. This is the one with the Hebrew name for the surviving remnant that was on the same block as my grandparents' farm. This is a favorite picture of mine when congregants celebrated the arrival of their Torah outside the stiebel. My grandfather is holding the staff in the front. They created the Jewish Poultry Farmers Association, a Landsmannschaft or combination mutual aid society and social club like the ones earlier generations of immigrants established in big cities. Their Farband, which was Yiddish for association, as they called it, hosted dinner dances and stars of the Yiddish stage, comedians, poets, and journalists to standing room only crowds at the local high school, which was the only venue capable of holding hundreds and hundreds of people. They also commemorated what later became known as the Holocaust. This is a flyer for the program that they held at one of the local synagogues in 1961. The survivors kept to themselves at first. They later remembered feeling unwelcome by the existing Jewish community. Some recalled American-born Jews could be downright cruel, with comments about how they must have done something wrong to wind up in a prison camp. It's difficult, so many decades later, to tease out what exactly explains these community dynamics. What survivors experience as cruelty might have been fumbling attempts by American-born Jews, unsure about what to say, unintentionally saying the wrong thing. Even the most well-meaning American Jews found it difficult to relate to survivors face to face. They had no conception of what they'd endured or how to talk to them. Some survivors may have avoided American-born Jews because they felt self-conscious around them, although the earlier German Jewish refugees recalled feeling equally unwelcome when they arrived. The German Jews and post-war survivors also largely stayed apart at first, with both feeling more comfortable among their own. These distinctions tended to break down over time, with the children of survivors and the German Jewish refugees joking about intermarriage with the American-born Jews decades later. Many of the survivor farmers had very warm memories of their time there, while others hated every minute, which was in many cases such a drastic fall in their status from their lives in Europe. Their children tended to enjoy farm life, which could be both idyllic and dangerous. My mother's earliest memories include petting soft baby chicks. This photo still sits on her shelf at home, and the sight of the rifle her father kept handy to kill predators trying to snatch chickens. They had ample time to explore their physical surroundings and were granted a great deal of freedom to do so. Their parents were so busy running farms and didn't have time to watch their children too closely. Children had to entertain themselves, particularly during summer break from school. Nearly everyone recalled days on a patch of sand along the Morris River where the children played, teenagers danced at the jukebox, and their parents played cards while gossiping in Yiddish. On the one hand, the survivors' children lived a very cloistered life, one full of Jewish Poultry Farmer Association, Hanukkah, Purim, and as in this photo, Lag BaOmer parties and socializing with other farm families in Yiddish or Polish. But the Grinna, as they were known, also felt pressure to keep up with neighbors and provide whatever they imagined a proper American childhood required. So they made sure to sign up their kids for Little League or the Girl and Boy Scouts. This is my mother's troop posing with Vineland's mare. At times they could also feel uncomfortable, cast in their small schoolhouse Christmas pageants. Some families avoided the dissonance by enrolling their children in the private Jewish day school that opened in the fall of 1953 in a renovated farmhouse. Only in Vineland could the eventual site of the Jewish day school share the same stretch of rural road as Jewish chicken farms, a stiebel, as well as the grounds of a rodeo horse show and a nearby car racing track. As teenagers, the survivors' children watched Dick Clark's American Bandstand, filmed nearby in Philadelphia, to pick up on the latest fashions, hairdos, and dance moves, while their mothers felt guilty if they couldn't afford to throw them a proper Sweet 16. The Jewish Agricultural Society and the survivors didn't know it at the time, but the refugees had entered poultry farming at the worst possible moment. Small family farms were finding it increasingly hard to compete with mega farms that were rising in the South. They had much lower labor costs and could support 50,000, 100,000, and ultimately 1 million birds. In October 1954, Hurricane Hazel barreled through Vineland, peeling roofs off of coops like the lids of tin cans and killing or leaving homeless tens of thousands of birds. Given the hard times ahead, the lucky ones might have actually been the farmers who lost everything and used insurance proceeds to start over in a new business or in an entirely different place. Farm families looked for other ways to supplement their income as egg prices dropped. Many farm wives, including my grandmother, found work at Vineland garment factories. Others tried branching out into adjacent businesses, such as cracked eggs for bakeries, or took up routes, as was mentioned earlier, in Philadelphia or Delaware or elsewhere. Others abandoned farming altogether. As the 1960s progressed, they found it increasingly hard to make a living, and many abandoned their farms or South Jersey to find better work elsewhere. My grandparents and mother stayed until she graduated high school in 1964. In the decades that followed, nearly every farm ceased operating, and the Jewish community in Vineland began to shrink, just as in similar Jewish rural communities where the Jewish communities had already contracted elsewhere in America. By the time I visited Vineland for the first time in 2004 on my first research trip there, few relics remained from the city's poultry past. This is the farmhouse directly across the road from my grandparents'. The farmhouse still stands, but the coops have since been torn down. In writing this book, I hope I've helped preserve this mostly forgotten chapter in Jewish American history, which might be more remembered in this crowd than others. And I hope I've given some sense of what this unique place was like in that era. I also had more selfish motive in dedicating a good chunk of a quarter century to the project. And nothing else, I hope my 20-something niece and nephew, who got to know my grandmother before she died in 2014, will eventually read the book. And one day I hope my now 10-year-old son, who's a bit younger in this photo, when we visited a exhibit at the National Museum of American Jewish History in Philadelphia, he was born a year after my grandmother died, and I hope he'll learn the story and perhaps share it with his children one day. So thank you very much for listening. I'd be happy to take questions. And if you have any others, I'm going to leave my email here for a moment. And this is also the Facebook page for the book where I had posted a number. If you like the pictures here, there are many more there that people have shared with me prior to or since the book published. So thank you again.
Seth, thank you. That was great. And thank you. That brought back a lot of the pieces of the book. I'd like to maybe start off with one question.
Sure.
I've got more, but um, of the interviews you gave, and even your conversations with your grandmother, was there one either story or lesson or interview that was maybe most surprising to you in terms of what you heard and maybe what you learned from it?
I mean, I think that for me, the big takeaway is that, and I don't necessarily have to tell this to this particular crowd, but the survivors weren't a monolith. I think there's a tendency to either, particularly in the immediate post-war years, to view them as all damaged or later to tell just the stories of triumph and success. But it was a range, and that was certainly true in Vineland. Some people it was a launching pad for tremendous success for themselves and even more so for their children. Others of the survivors there struggled. They differed so much in their religious observance and whether they maintained or lost their faith. So that's really what struck me is it's not just one story, it's many, many stories. And I hope I've tried to tell that the breadth of that in the book.
I'd mentioned, I think we have a couple folks who have connections to Vineland, and I'm wondering if any of them would maybe like to chime in and maybe speak a little bit about their experience and again, how this kind of relates to much of what you were discussing.
Seth, can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
This is Steve Osterman, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's really wonderful to reminisce about Vineland. And many of the refugees that came in, we were all together with the synagogues, the Sons of Jacob and the synagogue on Park Avenue, Beth Israel, which I heard just closed. It was a great time because we were all interfaced with Italians and everyone got along very well. You mentioned the Morris River and the cemetery and how we enjoyed going there on the weekends and had a good time. And we had one pinball machine that everyone played with and was fighting over. Vineland High School for us was just the beginning of our venture to get into the world and become successful. Many of all the Vineland, I call them young men and women, have prospered. All right. And thankfully, many of us are still healthy today. And the Vineland High School graduating class of 1963, which I was part of, still has a camaraderie. We've had our not graduations. Anyway, we all went to Cape May because one of our graduates had a little motel down there. But as far as I'm concerned, Vineland was one of the greatest places to grow up. And I thank you so very much. Also, in your book, you talked about Miles Lerman, who was my neighbor. And if you just want to say a few words, I think it's well mentioned, if you can tell us.
Sure. Miles Lerman, the connection there was the personal connection. He came over with on the Marine Perch, the same crossing, and also was in New York, and wound up on a farm. Knew more the family that my grandparents lived with. Had talked up Vineland and helped explain why the Lermans wound up in Vineland. He became one of the leaders of the poultry farming community and then left it and went into the oil business, home heating oil, and then vehicles, and had with tremendous success with that. And then he later in life went on to be one of the creators of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. So on that spectrum that I described of success, he is an example of tremendous success in America.
Thank you.
We, I will ask a question. What did, Seth, how did how'd your family react to the book coming out? And to the level of details that you provide about your grandmother and your mom? What was your mom's response and other family members?
Well, excuse me. I think, she certainly wasn't surprised. I'd been talking with my grandmother and then my mother for years and years and years. At first there's a hesitance, I think, to share. It's not everything is great. I think my mom enjoyed growing up there. She has very positive memories, but it was very hard. They didn't do terribly well. They probably stayed longer than they should have into the period when farming was quite difficult. So you don't necessarily find it easy to tell those stories about your own family's challenges, but she's been very heartened by the book. People have gotten in touch with her and just the general reception, and I was concerned overall, how would it be received? I didn't grow up there. I didn't visit there until the 80s, one time with I think with my mom for a high school reunion. So I'm a generation removed, and that was my own concern. Was I gonna be able to capture it in the right way? And my goal was to tell a complete story, not just the good, but some of the bad and the challenges and the occasional instances of arson when farming went bad. So I was trying to tell a balanced story.
Matt, if I may make a comment. Seth, thank you so much for this book. I'm David Preston's wife, but I'm also the granddaughter of Morris Goldfein, a chicken farmer, and I have such wonderful memories of being in Vineland. I think my grandfather probably never owned a suit. And so when you showed those pictures of everyone in suits, I was like, well, I don't think that was him. I mean, they struggled. They were wonderful people, unsuccessful chicken farmers. My uncle, Shy Goldfein, and his wife Babe went on to have the store at the Alliance Beach where they made steak sandwiches, and I learned to kind of dirty dance to the jukebox at the beach, and it was really wonderful. And your comment about how the survivors were somewhat separated from the American Jews, I think there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of sorrow there, but it was really a wonderful place to try to figure it all out. So thank you so much for writing this book. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a question from Judy. So what she says is, and you mentioned it, the survivors came from a number of countries. It wasn't just Poland. Um, Her grandparents had a chicken farm. They were German Jews. Their last name was Loeb. One, she wants to know if you came across the name, and I guess the other question is, um, how did people from, again, whether it was Poland, Germany, Austria, Lithuania, wherever, I know Yiddish was part of what kept them together. Were there other ties that also allowed people from what were unique or different cultures and languages, you know, keep them together?
Well, I think, well, the Loebs, I mean, I recall reference to a Loeb family, but I can't tell you if that's the same. I think what kept the pre-war Austrian, the people who arrived in the 30s or before the U.S. entry into the war in the early 40s, the German and Austrian Jews tended to stick together. They had their own club, the Poultryman's Club. And then the post-war arrivals tended to stick together. And so, yes, it was not just Polish Jews, there were Hungarian Jews, and you name the country, but the disproportionate number of Europe, Jews in Europe were from the Eastern European countries, and a number of the survivors were as well. But there were so many survivors in Vineland that they really could segment. So if you were Hungarian Jews and you wanted a poker game to speak in Hungarian, you could congregate that way. So that was part of, I think, why they stuck it out, was because of that familiarity, because of that level of, in the case of my grandmother, she didn't want to talk about the war. Some people did, so she could socialize or play poker with other women who spoke Polish and Yiddish and didn't want to talk about the war. So I think that really explains it. And there were little shtiebels for different, if you were used to practicing and worshiping in a tradition in Hungary or Germany or Poland, there were little shtiebels for you as well.
Um, Another question, and by the way, I do like your point of the fact you're right that this is not a unitary population, and certainly, again, my wife and the number of the people here who are in fact two Gs can certainly speak to the differences. Your relationship with your grandmom, were there things that your grandmom told you that perhaps your mom didn't know about and maybe even was surprised to find out about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly true for me, but I think is a wider phenomenon where the survivors found it difficult to speak to their children, particularly about the war, and would find it a little easier to talk to their grandchildren, maybe because it was more of a detachment. They were closer to the end of their lives. And wanted stories preserved. If you thought you were ruining your kids with the stories, you were less concerned about ruining your grandkids, whatever the reason may be. So there were details about her wartime experience that she told me, but it was still very difficult to talk about the war and hiding in the forest. That she just simply couldn't talk about that. The Vineland life, it was easier to some extent. There were aspects of it, particularly as the farming it went so badly that I think it was difficult for her to talk about. But yeah, I think there were ways in which she told me more than she might have told her own daughter.
By the way, if anyone wants to ask a question, one, you can unmute yourself. Two, you can put it in the chat. And three, you can put your hand up via Zoom, just as a quick note if anybody wants to do that. Um,
I had a quick question.
oh,
This is Karen Wisnia. I'm a child of a survivor. There was a word you used explaining how it was kind of like maybe a nickname given for the people who were.
Right.
What was that
Right.
word?
The Grina, like greenhorn. It was a play on the term
Mhm.
greenhorn. The Grina. They actually referred to themselves that way, that was what they called themselves in the community. Um, So I don't think it was derogatory. It was just that was how they referred to themselves.
Thank you.
Matt,
Yeah.
Steve Osterman
Hey,
again.
Steve.
How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you. I have to say, Matt and his wife really are special people. Like he said, we met in the shul and we talked about Vineland, and I gave him the book that he was so happy to have, and he was instrumental in doing all of this. So I thank him very much. But many of the immigrants that came from Poland and from Germany, after they couldn't make any money and they were selling their eggs at the cooperative for 50 cents or less a dozen, uh, and they were not making any money. Then in 1953, Hurricane Hazel came, and which was a very strong storm, hurricane, and it uh, annihilated most of the chicken coops in Vineland. And those that went back to farming went back to the what they knew. And then many of those farmers decided to take their money and became motel owners in Atlantic City and Ventnor and Margate. So we all prospered because we really never knew weren't that wealthy, but we were wealthy as a group. Thank you again for letting me share.
Yeah, I'd just like to say a few words. I'm Steve
Yeah.
Lutzen. I was from North Jersey, and I just want to thanks, Seth. You and I spoke a few years ago. We found out we both were lawyers. We had been at Cornell, and we even got affiliated with Bloomberg. So hello again, and it's really very touching to hear that story. And I got to know Miles because I was on the President's Commission of the Holocaust with him and the council. We actually traveled to Europe together, and he was really truly a driving force in that in creating the museum. And if he was an example of the drive of the other people in Vineland, I would say you had a very creative force and a very powerful force of people. So I think you reflected that, and I just want to say thank you for that, Seth.
Where are you?
Need some.
Oh, no, Spoon can unmute herself.
I have one more statement, Steve Osterman again. Thank you for talking about Miles. Miles was my neighbor, and he was so driven that he went to President Carter and he asked President Carter for land to build a museum. And President Carter was kind enough to give him the land, and he told him that he would not fund it. And they went around the world getting money, and they raised $190 million, which was the family money to make that a reality. So we all were touched very much by Vineland. Thank you. Thanks again, Seth, and everyone that's listening.
Just like to, my name is Simon Sayons. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors, and my mom's first cousin was a poultry farmer. And although you didn't mention other areas of New South Jersey that had predominant poultry farmers, in addition, I just wanted like to ask if you had any connection or reference in your book to those poultry farmers of the McKee City, Pleasantville area of New Jersey also.
Yeah, I mean there were communities, and I don't want to suggest or anyone to take away the idea that Vineland was the only place where there were Jewish poultry farmers or survivors. It tended to be the largest concentration for the reasons I mentioned. But there were particularly like the pre-existing communities north of there that had attracted survivors, had attracted Jewish farmers earlier in the 1900s. So there were other communities, but this is where the survivor concentration was largest.
Yeah, if I could chime in on that, Mays Landing was another place. Did anybody know Dave Roth in Mays Landing? He had two children, Kathy and Freddie. He's a chicken farmer. Does that ring a bell for anybody? I guess not.
No, no, good question.
And there was also there was the Roths. That I think they were in Vineland, also chicken farmers. He has son Joey Roth, and they were survivors. They were the parents. There was it was Dave, and we called her Faggy, but her English name was Regina Roth in Mays Landing. That doesn't ring a bell, I guess. Okay.
Not for me, but again, I mean, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of families. I was able to. There was no like official list of the Jewish poultry farmers, so it was a matter of.
Yeah, Seth, how did you do? I was actually going to ask that.
Yeah.
How did you interview obviously a lot of people in the book. How did you, I mean, you're right, there wasn't a telephone book, I guess, that you
Right.
could pick up and say, I want to call the Goldsteins and whatever.
Well, to find, and it's an estimate when I say roughly 1,000. So the Jewish Agricultural Society's records are available at the Center for Jewish History in New York. So I looked through that in microfilm and eventually was digitized. I looked at census records and phone books because at the time in a phone book you would list poultry farmer, and then I was able to cross-reference that against the census records, the records for when people came on ships, and which is in the archives, and phone books and obituaries and local papers. So just a combination of factors that allowed me to identify people.
Oh, excuse me. Can I just tell one story from the chicken farm?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So, I grew up in South Philly. My parents had a grocery store, and like I said, one of our friends, like they were all family, fellow Holocaust survivors, because we didn't have any. So, Freddie would come to the big city to us for a couple weeks, and we would go out to the farm in Mays Landing. And his dad gave me the ultimate amusement park ride. He put me on, they had to go from one the chicken coops to the other to have the food on top of these, like it would hang from the ceiling, these pulleys or whatever, these a wooden what do you call, so with a wheel hanging from the top there. He would put me on top of that wooden thing to transport the grain, and he would run with me through it, and I'd be going through all these chicken coops. Every coop, the door would slam open, the chicken would go, I'd be freaking out, and I'd be busting through like 3 or 4 or 5 of these chicken coops. That was like the ultimate amusement park ride you can only get in the chicken coop.
Steve Schimmel, you have a question?
Hi, everyone. This has been really nice. I am the former executive director of Jewish Federation of Cumberland, Gloucester, and Salem counties, and I was there from 2010 through 2016. And a lot of what we did related to this history and included bringing survivors to the various public schools, including Vineland High. Some of those survivors were people like Esther Robb and Shirley Gottesman.
Mhm.
Well, fast forward, and now I serve as executive director of Jewish Federation of Central Massachusetts up in Worcester, Mass, where I am right now. And during last year's Yom HaShoah program, I was relaying the story of this woman, Shirley Gottesman, a survivor who lived in Millville, and who had been a survivor of Auschwitz and a witness to the sabotage of the crematorium there, which is an incredibly powerful story that Shirley would tell, how everyone sang Hatikva as they were watching the saboteurs who ultimately were hung, which is, incredibly poignant. And I'm glad she relayed that story. As I was telling it during Yom HaShoah, someone came up who had been in the audience and said, "Oh, my goodness, Shirley Gottesman from Millville, New Jersey. I know her. We used to go down to Alliance Beach every summer." And this fellow's name is David Nesselbaum. So the memories of Alliance Beach and the Morris River and the community exists and lives on well outside of the boundaries of Vineland or even South Jersey.
So I think, thanks, Stephen. I think the name is Nessenbaum. Nessenbaum. And he was in the perfume business. His mother was a survivor, and he has sadly passed away. But
I think we're talking about a different person then. The fellow who I know is alive here in Massachusetts.
I should say that the Cumberland County, the Jewish Federation, had the great wisdom in around 2000 to do a series of oral histories with a number of the chicken farmers. And that was, again, another resource that was tremendously helpful for me. It was about a dozen different interviews, some of them the German Jews and the survivors who came after the war. And again, whoever had that idea had great foresight to capture those stories while they were still alive.
I think Mr. Lerman and Esther Robb played a big role in making that happen. There continues to exist today an organization called the South Jersey Holocaust Coalition.
Right, yeah. I've spoken with them.
Yeah, and they help to preserve some of this history and Holocaust education in general.
Stephen, do you know if Sam Gottesman was related to the
Yes.
Gottesman?
If I'm thinking of the same person, Sam Gottesman would have been Shirley's husband.
Okay, and he drove a truck, one of those large
Possibly.
trucks. Because I remember him take me riding back to his place. It was he woke me up dirt early in the morning when these large, like 18-wheeler sized trucks.
And a son named Lester. The son would have been Lester on and the family, extended family in Staten Island, where Shirley ended up moving after Millville in around 2017. And she ultimately lived there the remaining years of her life.
Wow. Okay.
One of the fascinating aspects of all of this, of course, is just driving around there and seeing all the roads that are named after Jews, and all throughout Cumberland and Salem County, and of course the towns themselves that are named after Jews, like Brotmanville and Rosenhain. It is kind of sad to recognize that it's all changing very, very rapidly, but that is a big part of American Jewish history.
Yeah, those communities were all from the colony era, the earlier dating back to the 1880s and 1890s, the Alliance being the most famous and for a time successful colony, but all of the cluster of little towns that you mentioned, some of them had their own colonies, or the people from the colonies set out and established those towns. So that history predated the survivor era, and eventually they kind of emptied out. But I should mention the efforts of one of the American Jews who was most helpful to the survivors was Harry Levin. Harry Levin was a lawyer, and just in the book, I hope it comes across just sort of selfless, kind, and he was a lawyer and became a local judge, a municipal judge, and his greatest joy in life, he was known as the marrying judge, would just any time of day or night help people get officiate at weddings. But his grandson has tried to revive the family farm and Alliance, tried various efforts at agriculture there, and really makes tremendous efforts to preserve the history and that that sense of Jewish agriculture in Alliance itself on his family property there.
Yeah, that's called Alliance Community Reboot. And he's active on social media. And I think they're operating out of the the property adjacent to the Moses Bayek House.
Yeah.
He was the leader of Alliance Colony in the 1880s.
I have a question and something to share, actually, if it's okay. My name is Dan Schwartz. I'm a 2G, and I've had the honor of speaking to this group in the past about my mom's story, who's a survivor. I had a question, and then I also wanted to announce something for next week in terms of a program. But did you have use as a source of Stockton University or connection to the Woodbine Brotherhood Synagogue or the museum there? If anyone hasn't been to Woodbine and that synagogue, I would highly recommend it. It's really, nicely restored and beautiful inside, and the museum is really, an ongoing, I believe, resource for Holocaust education. And obviously Stockton is as well and has a lot of the history, I think, that's connected to your story.
Yeah, Stockton's done just great work at the Holocaust Center there in preserving the stories and the geography of the farms. And I shared all of my spreadsheet with my 1,000. I gave them the Excel file, so whatever use that is in supplementing their own records of who were farming families. But yeah, they deserve tremendous credit for what they've done and what they continue to do in this area, in this space.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. If I can just share that a week from today, on Sunday, February 1st at 1 o'clock, Sons and Daughters is co-sponsoring a program together with numerous other Holocaust organizations, including the Philadelphia Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center, Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors, and 3G Philly. We will be viewing a film called Traces, Voices of the Second Generation, Children of Holocaust Survivors sharing their families' true stories. And then after the film, we will be having a panel discussion that will include our own Simone Gorko and myself and others from the organization. So if Jeanette, hopefully you can pass or email the flyer to attend. It will be on Zoom as we are tonight, so weather should not be an obstacle. We'll all be able to view the film together and to be a part of the post-film panel discussion. So please join us if you're available. If you want to come in person, it will be located at Or Hadash, which is in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, suburb of Philadelphia, and that's the synagogue I belong to, and we'll be glad to host this event, and really thankful to all the organizations, including Sons and Daughters, who are co-sponsoring this. Thanks.
Dan or Simone or Jeanette, one of you, any of you, can that flyer be sent? So is question one to especially those that are on, well, to whoever it is that should be notified about that, number one. Number two, do you need to register to attend? How is that working?
Yes, so the flyer has a registration, and all you have to do is a QR code, take a photo with your phone, and you'll be directed to the Zoom link. You also do need to pre-register if you want to come in person. And there is a separate QR code on the flyer that you can do that in person.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the flyer will be sent out again. It has been sent out to the group earlier, but now that we're getting closer to the time, it will be sent out one more time, and hopefully everybody either can be in person. Hopefully the weather will be a little bit better than what it is now, but if you're not in the area and you want to take advantage of the Zoom, Please let me know if you're not on my regular mailing list. I do have a list of people who are not in the greater Philadelphia area. And you can also join us via Zoom.
And please do share this event with anyone that you think would be interested, other organizations. We had someone from Massachusetts on, which would be great. And it sounds like you're involved in the work directly in terms of Holocaust education and awareness. And I mean, I have family from Baltimore and Israel, and anyone can join. And they plan to do that.
A comment about the book. Seth, thank you for writing it. The farmer who had a store in the Newcastle Farmers Market. My father, who was also a Polish survivor, had a store in the Newcastle Farmers Market. And I do not remember another survivor there, but I was really pleased to have that reference there.
Yeah, I mean, that's an example of the efforts to find other sources of income as the farms were failing. They looked to sell at farmers markets or wherever they could. So
yeah, it made me happy.
That's great.
Okay, Rhonda has a little anecdote to share.
So my grandfather, they went from being sadly unsuccessful chicken farmers to unsuccessful tomato farmers. And my father used to tell a story that they would load up the truck and drive from Vineland to Campbell Soup to sell the tomatoes. In Camden.
Right.
And that when they would approach the gate, that there would be a sign out front how much they were offering to buy a bushel of tomatoes for, and that the price was often less than the bushel itself, so that they would turn around and drive back. And along the way, they would dump the tomatoes because the weight was burning too much gasoline. So they had to go home, tell my grandmother that not only did that they wasted all that gas and they didn't sell any tomatoes. They were definitely hard times, but I got there at the point where it was just all seemed wonderful and exciting.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Campbell's because a lot of I remember my mom and grandmother and others saying that they would sell the chickens that got old and could no longer lay eggs to Campbell's in Camden. So that did not give me or my family the greatest impression of the freshness of Campbell's chicken soup, and I laughed a few months ago when some Campbell's executive was insulting the product which he was supposed to be selling, and it seemed like not much had changed in the decade since. So
There is one post here from, where did it go? Oh, from Valerie, that Seth, something about collaborating with ADAMAH. I don't want to say it wrong. Adama?
not
Is that familiar? Well,
I think that would be in reference to the Levin family on the Alliance Community Reboot. I think that's the
Right. Adama, it used to be
Yeah.
called Hazon. It's the most important Jewish farming and education organization out there. The Federation person who was on, I don't think he's here anymore, would surely know about it. But if you're in touch with that next generation farmer, Adama
okay.
will be a really important partner for him.
Great, good to know.
Everyone, I really want to thank everyone who joined this evening. Great questions. Seth, thank you again. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for
having me.
The story, and thank you for joining us this evening.
It's great. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. I just want to mention Speaking Yiddish to Chickens, published by Rutgers University Press, widely available on Amazon and elsewhere. Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Matt and Susan, for arranging this wonderful program.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Yeah.